EarthWise Pet team is really excited today to have a special guest on that I'm actually going to let Erica Spath introduce because she's been hanging to chat with this gentleman for years now. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, this is all about pet wellness, holistic pet wellness, what we believe is species-appropriate nutrition for our dogs and cats, and that's what we chat about. So, Erica, would you like to introduce this lovely gentleman?
Of course, yes. As Diana just mentioned, I am absolutely fangirling in this moment, and not only a huge fan of, obviously, his work, but everything that dovetails off of his work in terms of our work at EarthWise Pet. He's the godfather of raw, right? Like, he is the guy that coined the term biologically appropriate raw food diet. And how often do we say that term, Lisa? How often would you say that? Just on a daily basis?
Extremely often, yes. Probably still not often enough, but extremely often.
Right. So Ian is what he prefers to go by, but most of you probably know him by Dr. Ian Billinghurst. If you can just kind of give our listeners a quick overview of your work, where it started, maybe back to your Give a Dog a Bone days, wherever you want to start.
Well, it's always a bad idea to give me free rein to talk. I'm better to be scripted and told to. Well, I always head down rabbit holes, but where do I start? A young veterinarian had always fed his dogs raw food, but then the last year of veterinary science, we were taught to feed processed pet food. We were told that was the best at the time. All we had to do was read the can or the packet. If it said complete and balanced, there was no AFCO in those days, but if it said complete and balanced, that was it. That's all we had to know. That was our nutritional training. I think I've mentioned before to one of you lovely ladies that I was very disappointed because we were taught nutrition by an agricultural science graduate, not by a veterinarian. Although, come to think of it, I think that's actually more correct in some ways because veterinarians are taught very badly about nutrition. But moving on, in practice, because I had some training in nutrition, I started to piece together what was happening with my clients' dogs and cats. The ones that paid the money, the ones that paid my bills, paid the nurses and insurance and everything else, were the ones that were fed processed pet foods. The ones that didn't pay my bills and would come in a very advanced age to be put to sleep because they were at an advanced age and had now used their use-by date. The biological clocks were shutting them down. These didn't pay my bills. And, I started to put it together. And at the end of the day, I realised that we vets were actually causing the problem. We were causing the health problems that we had been trained to fix. We were actually recommending food that was acting like a slow poison, that it was producing the ill health that then paid our bills. And I thought, I was absolutely gobsmacked and amazed when I realised this. Anyway, by that time, I was now recommending to all my clients to feed a raw, meaty, bone-based diet. And I realised it was actually based on evolutionary principles. So I went to my fellow vets, and there was a forum out there that was right across Australia called Control and Therapy. It was started by a wonderful Australian vet called Tom Hungerford. He's gone now. Anyway, Tom started this postgraduate foundation, and one of the things was this Control and Therapy, where he said, I want you to write in and tell the other vets across Australia, and he called it, because he was an old farming vet and a poultry vet sort of thing, he said, I want you to write about the dung, the guts and the blood of what you experience in veterinary practice. I don't want any niceties about any sort of controlled studies. I just want to hear what you do and what works. So I wrote in about what was working for me, which was to see amazing results by simply switching dogs off processed pet food and onto raw whole foods. And I received deafening silence. Nobody was in the least bit interested in this. The last thing they wanted to do was change their mind thinking about what they'd been taught at uni, that processed food was the best. I think it was, it didn't resonate. there were two people that did resonate with. One was a pig farmer, and the other one, a pig veterinarian, or we could more politely, a porcine veterinarian. Anyway, he told me in a letter, he said, I'm not going to tell this to anybody else, but I autopsy pigs, and all the leftover bits I feed to my dogs, and they are uproariously healthy. And of course, I wasn't surprised. The other one was a fellow called Ian Gawler. He was actually his wife. Ian Gawler is a vet in Australia. I think he's still with us. I keep meaning to find out. I'm pretty sure he is. But he had osteosarcoma, and he began a clinic because he cured himself using whole foods. I remember part of the deal was calf liver. But without going into what he did, he started a wellness clinic, and he started treating cancer patients using the sort of therapy he'd used on himself. And she said, we understand totally what you're talking about. Anyway, so having tried to tell the vets about this, I thought, well, okay, I have to go to the people. So I wrote this non-scientific book, very simple little book called Give Your Dog a Bone.
Yes.
And it just happened to coincide with the rise of the internet. And very soon I was selling it everywhere, and it took me around the world lecturing for the next 10 years. So that in a very short space of time. And and I even got to speak. I even got to speak. That's very good, I even got to speak at the Pet Food Forum. This was in 2002. And my talk was titled, Raw Whole Foods. Is this the future of pet foods? Now, this was actually greeted with really mixed emotions. But this was actually the catalyst that began the raw pet food industry in North America, which then spread rapidly across the globe. So that's a potted history of where it all began. And by the way, I actually wrote Give Your Dog a Bone so I'd never have to talk about this stuff again.
Well, you did a great...
All you've had to do is talk about it.
It was a massive fail.
Yeah, totally. But we're appreciative that was a failure, honestly, because that gave me chills when you said that book and that, next 10 years literally sparked the industry that we're all in today. That is so incredible to me. I have a question though, hearing, how this all started and how you got started into the diet. What was the spark or the catalyst that even made you consider a different type of diet, and specifically an evolutionary diet as you termed it?
What was the spark? Oh, there were many sparks, but I can tell you a story. Picture an Irish setter with no hair, skin and bone, really unable to walk. Pet parents came in. Can you do anything? Do you think we should put it down? They'd been to dozens of vets. They'd heard about me and what I did. And by this stage, I had some simple dietary programs. This was before I wrote Give Your Dog a Bone. And I looked at it and I thought, oh. And I gave them my dietary program. We had a long talk about it and explained the diet to them, the raw, meaty, bone-based diet, and sent them away. And I thought, they will go to another vet and have this dog put down. Anyway, 6 months later, they came back and they had a new dog. Beautiful, flowing coat, just walked like an Irish setter, flowed. We were upstairs, by the way, and this was my very first practice, whole story there. But anyway, up the stairs, this dog came. I thought, oh. I said, so you've got a new dog? We have. But it's our old dog, the same. It's better. All they'd done was change the diet. Now, I've seen this many times again since that time, but this one absolutely resonated. And I knew from that time that this was, well, I guess I'd already known, but this one really said to me, yes, you are on the right path. And it's, I'm a student of scientific philosophy, and my mentor, the person I look to, is a fellow called Karl Popper. I think Karl Popper is dead now. He wrote a book called Conjectures and Refutations. And in that book, he explained, and you have to read it about 10,000 times, and it takes a long time, but basically his premise is that we can't prove anything. All we can do is fail to disprove a hypothesis.
Interesting.
Okay. So my hypothesis is that if you feed an animal the diet it evolved eating and to require, the broad range, the timing, the approximate balance, you will feed every nutrient that animal requires. That is a truly balanced diet. And that's my hypothesis. And it's been my hypothesis ever since, and I haven't varied from that. It includes rawness, wholeness, and the broad range of foods, and in a particular, in fact, for the dog, it's not 80-10-10, that's rubbish. It's 60-15-15-10, where the 60 is raw meaty bones, the 15 is raw crushed vegetables, the other 15 is internal organs, but principally kidney, liver, and heart, and the other 10% is what I call poo substitutes. Okay? So 60-15-15-10. That is a hypothesis I have not been able to disprove my entire professional life since I decided that was the truth of feeding dogs.
Amazing.
I love that story.
I do too. And the thing that I love about it is that it's important for people to hear this. It's not just preventative, it's healing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's healing. And you could those proportions are not written in stone. They're the centre of ranges, if you will. And it varies around. And if you have a sick dog, really sick with an advanced problem, so like kidney failure, then you can change those proportions. But this is quite different to one of the modern prescription diets, where you are just homing in, say, in kidney failure, on just this metabolic abnormality. So that's all you're homing in on. When you change a dog or a cat to its evolutionary food program, so not talking about nutrients, just a food program, we forget about nutrients. If you change a dog or a cat to that, you change all the metabolic abnormalities that the wrong food it's been eating all its life have been causing. And so you are fixing health across the whole spectrum of that dog's life. Such a different thing. And that's what we see. But most of the time, for most cases of a disease, and this also is something I've just witnessed my entire life, you don't have to change those proportions. If you stick with them, most problems just quietly disappear. Because all you're doing, it's like having a car and putting the right fuel, the right spare parts in, and doing the right service schedule. Suddenly it starts to function properly. It's not rocket science, as they say. It's I think one of the most difficult things to teach is simplicity. But there's a thing called it's gone from my head. This is old age for you. Yeah.
But we talk about simplicity all the time too. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it is.
Well, it's this principle that if you want looking for an explanation for something, it's usually the simplest explanation that is correct. If there are a dozen explanations, it's usually the simplest one that is correct. Yeah. Occam's razor. That's what it is.
Occam's razor. I was just going to say that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And that's one of our pain points, obviously, especially me, because I'm not in the nutrition team, but I'm very passionate about it. Clearly, I'm the marketer. But that's one of the things that we want people to see it from two different ways. We feel like we need science to convince them now because people have been brainwashed, and so now we need science to prove that you need to get off of all of that processed stuff, right? But at the end of the day, we actually wish science had nothing to do with it, and it was just basic common sense. It's like, what would your dog run after and eat if it was in the wild? And science should almost have never had anything to do with this decision, but now we're having to use science to bring people back to simplicity.
Well, you see, science has been used in a very bad way. We have two paradigms. One paradigm says, if I take a committee of so-called experts, and I'm not sure who chooses this committee, that's another problem, but we choose a committee of experts, and these so-called experts then decide which nutrients are essential and which nutrients are non-essential. And so the essential ones get put into the food, the non-essential ones get left out. And they're not really concerned about food because all they've done is looked at individual nutrients, magnesium, phosphorus, calcium, sodium, etc., and made a decision, a compromise decision, by the way, because they've all got different opinions, on how much of each of these. And then they say, oh, and these must be fed daily. All right? So that's one approach to nutrition. It's really a really flawed approach. The other approach is to say, what did a dog evolve to eat? Now, this is the sensible zoo approach. A sensible zoo approach will take that. Now, sometimes they employ a nutritionist if they can't get those foods at a particular animal, and they'll try and work out what that nutrient balance should be. But that invariably is never as good as simply working out what the actual foods are that this animal requires. Because if you feed those actual foods, you include the nutrients that that committee of experts knew about, the ones they didn't know about, and the ones they decided weren't essential, which are actually the very ones that are going to give this animal good health and longevity. So those are the two different paradigms. Now, one is based on evolutionary science, and I wanted to give you and I'm a fan of a man called Theodosius Dobzhansky. Now, he was a geneticist. He was from Ukraine. He's from the Ukraine, when it was part of Russia, actually, at the time. I'm still trying to be that way. That's another terrible story, isn't it? But moving on from that, in 1973, he was the geneticist. He moved to America, and he became the principal geneticist that took over a lot of Darwin's work and expanded on it. Okay, so he really was a huge figure in American genetics up until the 70s. And his work is enormous. But this paper he wrote was this. It was titled this, and this is really a central theme, the central scientific basis of my work. It was before I had even realized what he was doing. But he said, nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. Because evolution has actually formed the genome of every animal, and it's formed what I call the nutritional genome of the animal. So that nutritional genome, to function properly, now demands the foods that actually help form the genome. I mean, again, it's not rocket science. It's so obvious, but it's difficult. If you have a trained nutritionist, a PhD in nutrition, they don't get it. They can't fathom that because it is too simple. It's too Occam razor-ish. But there it is. That's the answer. And you can't make a complete and balanced diet. There's no such thing as a complete and balanced diet, because what a complete and balanced food program is, it's a relationship between real food, the absolute deepest possible complexities, the biochemical complexities of real food, and the physiology, the biochemistry of the animal. This is a relationship. So the complete and balancing is a relationship between real food, its complexities, and the physiology, the biochemistry, the biology of the animal that's eating it. And this is a relationship that's developed over millions of years. You cannot put that into a food which they haven't evolved eating, which is what we're trying to do today. And on top of that, then you feed them what is even worse, a form of energy, carbohydrates, which is absolutely inappropriate from, again, an evolutionary standpoint. And, you know, if you want to fatten an animal destined for an early death and slaughter, you give it carbohydrates. You don't give it fat and protein. And that's what we do. So we've actually taken the AVCO model for feeding livestock because the American Association of Feed Control officials, or whatever, but they were responsible over many years for stock feed for animals destined for slaughter at an early age, fattening, rapid early growth. That's an absolute recipe. And we were taught this in agricultural science, by the way, that if you take an animal and feed it like an animal fed for slaughter and take it past that use-by date of slaughter, it will develop every metabolic disease that you see in companion animals.
Wow. That's interesting.
It is just, I look at all this and I think it is so obvious, all of this, but nobody's seeing it. And today we have all our gurus of raw, and I watch this on the internet, and I've actually been glad that I'm giving the opportunity of late. I'd actually given up, really, but then I was invited to become an advisor to Gussie's Gut, a fermented vegetable product company with Rob Ryan. Anyway, I'd actually given up, but we see these raw gurus on the internet, and they all want to say, oh, you have to feed according to AVCO. You have to get each nutrient on a spreadsheet and with a computer. You don't need any of that. You just need that simple ratio of real whole raw foods. Then you supply the nutrients that interact with that body, and it's called homeostasis, the interaction between an animal and its environment. And that is what provides health and longevity. Again, and that is real science, because the complexities of that relationship, and we are gradually unraveling little tiny bits of it, quite often in relation to cancer, for example, because we see the metabolic change there with the cancer. Most cancers feed principally on sugar. So we're unraveling a lot of those pathways, but and then a scientist discovers this little bit of it, and then somebody gets excited, oh, you've got to do this and you've got to do that. You don't have to know any of that. It's all there. And if you look at it closely, when I'm doing that, you see it's actually confirming the raw hypothesis, the simple one that I've spoken about, the Occam's razor one, if you look at it. But don't worry about it, because a child of 10 can produce the proper diet for a dog and cat that a PhD in nutrition never could, simply by following, just feeding it food, and the food it evolved to require. Again, the doing of it is not rocket science. The how it works is beyond our comprehension, but we're gradually working bits of it out. But we don't get too excited by the bits. We just do the whole thing and watch our animal get better.
Oh, I think that's really well said. Like, I think, and, one of the stories that I often tell these lovely ladies, Ian, is, I grew up in the country, and not having enough money to feed fancy foods off the store shelf was actually a blessing, because our animals got all of the offcuts of everything from the farms. And so, we, they would live to ridiculous ages, but also never need vets. But I do want to touch on that, because obviously we're huge fans of vets. We need vets. We want them in our corner. We want to be in their corner. We don't want them to not be getting business, but we would prefer it to be business of keeping animals well and happy. And so I guess my question to you, I know that these ladies have tons of questions for you, but I have one question, and that is, should our audience be vets? Like, I'm guessing that's who you've been speaking to for many years. It's like, do we need to change their minds? What are they taught from your perspective, even coming from Australia? Tell us a little bit about what they're taught and what we have to do to get them into a better place as well.
Well, yes. What are we taught? How do we get them what are they taught? How do we get them into a better? Well, they are taught to be afraid of bugs, bones, and balance, which are the bugs, the bones in food, the bugs in food, and the balance. They're told that there's no way you can balance raw whole foods. You have to use scientific calculations and get a nutritionist to do it. That's what they're taught. They're taught that this food, any raw food program, will be unbalanced, and as such it will cause terrible diseases that will just kill the animal, number one. Number two, raw food is full of all sorts of bugs. They too will kill the animal, so don't ever recommend it. And bones, of course, are absolutely dreadful. You must never feed bones, because they will cause blockages and splinter in the bowel and all sorts of problems. So there is no reason in the world to feed raw whole foods when, and they don't use the term raw whole foods, but you don't feed raw foods, when you have got this beautiful scientific food that has been put together by absolute experts who know everything about nutrition. Mm-hmm. So, and vets are taught, look, when it comes to nutrition, don't worry about it. We'll give you a little bit of information, but at the end of the day, really call upon your local, I'm not going to name the products, but call upon that local rep. They will bring you out the right food for that condition, whether it's the food for kidney failure or inflammatory bowel disease, whatever it is. There's a fix there. But for the most time, just feed normal processed dog food. And the other thing they're taught is that food has nothing to do with the disease. Okay? It's all genetic. So don't worry about food. Nutrition is fine. That's something you can forget about. In fact, what you do is you have the girl at the desk, trained, the poor girl at the desk, trained to recommend and sell that big pile of brightly coloured packaging food with pictures of healthy fruit and vegetables and animal parts on it, bit chicken legs and what have you, and chicken wings. And that's what they're taught. So, all right, how do we fix it? During those early lectures, and I was probably in Saskatoon. I think we recorded this one, but there's bits of it still remaining. I said to them, look, you have to take in your healthy dogs once you've got them on this raw food diet. Take them into your vets, and you've got to teach your vets. Now, this also stems from my early years as an undergraduate, because we were taught by Professor Kirk. Professor Kirk was from America, and he was, Diana should maybe know, no, well, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. Professor Kirk was from America. He edited a book called Current Veterinary Therapy. So we were really honoured to have this bloke in our corner and teaching us. And he said, you really need to realise that your clients are going to be your best teachers. And he was actually referring to nutrition. And he said, ask your clients what they feed their pets and correlate it with their health. And this is actually what I did, but I did it with a nutritional background from ag science. And so this was something that was in my mind when I was lecturing to this group at Saskatoon. And I said to them, take your dogs to your vets, show them, let them see what's going on. Now, there is a story that repeats itself again and again, and I heard it the other day. These people, or a person goes in with a raw-fed puppy, might be 3 or 4 months old, for a vaccination and checkup and all that. The vet looks at this dog and this puppy and this young dog. It is growing beautifully. Look at its coat. Look at its teeth. What a magnificent, look at the muscle development. This is magnificent. What do you feed it? Raw food, you'll kill it. I mean, that's the response. So, but gradually, see, the thing is, vets are not trained as scientists. They're trained as technicians. They just have, if a dog has inflammatory bowel disease, you follow this protocol. And there's algorithms that take you to the diagnosis. When you reach that diagnosis, you are not looking at a dog. You're looking at a bit of paper with an algorithm and an endpoint. And at that endpoint, you can go off and say, this needs this, this, and this. Nobody looks at the dog these days because they've got all the biochemistry, they've got the ultrasounds, the x-rays, whatever. And when I went through, we were actually taught to look at the dog, to palpate, to feel, to ask questions, to find out what's going on. And with that background, that's why we used all those other things as well, but we correlated them. For example, I wrote a book called Grow Your Pups with Bones. One of the things that was a catalyst for this was I realised that we don't take radiographs of a dog's hips for a walk. We take the dog. And I saw some of the most atrocious looking hips on radiographs on dogs that walked perfectly normally. And I saw perfectly normal hips on dogs that could hardly move. So, you have to really look at the animal and not just the results of tests. And then you have to make informed decisions as a clinician, as a healer, not as a technician who was going through the rote of going through what you've been taught to do without giving it a moment's thought outside the square. And I think I might have talked to one of you or all of you before about this. the net result today is that young vets are failing to see any great results from their hard work. And for many of them, as they are rated on by owners, they also that there is a huge rate of suicide. Isn't that terrible? All on the basis of not understanding the true causes of disease. And on very poor training in that respect. I mean, they're training in diagnosis and everything, surgery, whatever. Actually, the surgery, not so great these days, but that's another story. It's all sent off to specialists. I actually feel sorry for them because I really wanted to become a master of the whole thing. So in those days, we had to do all the surgery ourselves, and there were not too many specialists around. Today, these poor kids, they come out, they're taught all these wonderful things of how to follow algorithms and the meaning of biochemistry results. But at the end of the day, they're not true healers. As I said, they're just technicians. And there's a lot more expected of them than they can deliver. And it must be beyond frustrating.
And I think that's frustrating for us too, because we don't ever want, like, we're frustrated with the way that vets are taught, and we know where that comes from to a certain extent. There is definitely, and it's important for the viewers to know that there is funding that comes from particular conglomerate companies that support that training, and you should know that it's not independent. But it's kind of frustrating for us too, because we want vets in our corner and vice versa. We want vets to be profitable. We don't want them to be committing suicide. We need them. But we would rather them be having more success stories, and how do we align nutrition into their job as well? So what they're doing is just making a better life for the cats and dogs, rather than fixing terrible, terminally ill, patients.
What I do in my lectures to vets quite often, or to mixed audiences, and I often see the vets come in and sit up the back. After a day of talking, many of them become convinced. They realise that their training was so poor. Because, you see, nobody asks, the question is not posed to young undergraduates, where does disease come from at a very fundamental level? It's just assumed that at this age, percentage of dogs will get this list of diseases as time goes by, and in old age, we know that cancer is going to turn up more commonly. Mm-hmm. But nobody's actually asking, where is it coming from? And my epiphany, of course, was I realised it was coming from the damn food that we were recommending as vets. So these vets, so when I teach this, there are more and more vets now coming on board and understanding, but it's still a minority. Because the pet food companies are pushing back harder and harder with their untruths. And of course, you have a young, impressionable vet at uni. Who's he going to believe?
I know.
Is he going to believe that this young mother has just come in with this healthy dog and just fed it scraps because she lived on a farm and didn't have much money? Has got a healthy dog. The one being fed this ultra-processed food is not healthy, as produced by scientists. Who's he going to believe? So we need a whole cultural change, and that's not going to happen until the pet food industry changes, because food is the foundation of health, and the foundation of health for our companion animals is the most atrocious food. It's acting like a slow poison. Now, this is a poison that acts so insidiously that the problems it causes are never linked to it, because they're too far into the future. They're too far in there. Not only that, nobody is asking the question, because we're not real scientists out there. We are simply technicians following rote formulas. And that's really sad. But yes, the whole thing has to come from the veterinarians. We have to gradually train our veterinarians. It's up to the raw feeders to do this. And yes, the other thing is that there is a whole host of biochemistry that is different for raw feeders as opposed to animals raised on processed pet foods. And this is a problem too, because we don't really know what those are yet. We know some of them. We know the BUN and creatinine are higher, that sort of thing. But, and that raises alarm bells. And another thing that happens quite often, and I'm not sure why, well, I do have some theories, is that raised liver enzymes on raw food, which causes great alarm. But anyway, these are areas, this is where we really need to carry out our research. I know they're doing a lot of fundamental research at university, which, I mean, I think it's in Helsinki that they're looking at inflammatory markers in the blood and saying, oh, there's less if you feed raw food. Yeah, well, that's great. But really, I think that sort of really deep, basic research, it's interesting, but we need epidemiological stuff. We need whole of life studies. And this is the real thing. This is because if we have one animal that's better on a raw food, that's anecdotal. If we have 10, probably still anecdotal. We have 100, 200, 1,000, and we do have that out there. Animals fed real whole raw food. That's epidemiological studies, and that's valid science. And it's valid based on that basic principle that nothing in biology
makes sense within the life.
Makes sense except in light of evolution. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that.
It's like circling back to we have to have science to prove it yet again, even though it's something simple. Like feeding a diet.
That's right. So
prove it to everybody.
I just find it amazing just to watch the whole circus of the science thing and the ridiculously simple way that they should be approaching it.
Yeah. And for our viewers too, or listeners, I should say, I know that there's a big point out there that I personally have come across when you were talking, Ian, I was like, yes, raw feeders unite. Let's all, go to our vets and be like, this is what I do. This is why my dogs are so healthy. And you never see me, right? Like you never see me because I don't come in. I don't have issues with my pets, that sort of thing.
Good point. That's an absolutely good point. Vets expect to see disease, and they do. They don't. So that's what they get. And a healthy dog is an abnormality. And it's way off the bell curve, way to the side. And so it's taken no notice of because it is an abnormality.
Yep, absolutely. And they're certainly not asking about diet, or if they are, they're spending very little time on the conversation. They're being like you talked about, just very negative about raw feeding. It's got bacteria problems. It's not safe because of bone splintering. You name it. I've heard it personally. And I have a comeback, as you would call it, an argument, a defense. Every single thing that they have ever said to me that is a negative about raw feeding, I have a positive or that's a false statement. And they don't do anything at that point. It's infuriating because you're thinking, I'm trying to instill this new way of thinking, this different knowledge that you have acquired over your very valid medical schooling experience. But there are, I would say millions out there, easily millions of raw feeders out there, especially today, that have this anecdotal experience like you're describing, where I have fed, one of my pets raw since they were 3 years old. She's now 12. The health difference alone that I have seen, not even doing blood values or anything like that, is insane. The difference is insane. And I see all of these wonderful success stories from all of our stores that are then sharing the same knowledge to their customers and having really significant health impacts in a beneficial way by literally just switching to a fresher diet. So Lisa, I know you have this question, so I'm going to let you ask this, but there comes a point too where we say, well, what if we can't? What if we can't, right? So Lisa, I know you have this question, so I'll let you ask.
A big challenge sometimes we hear too from customers is, I can't afford, that sounds great and I want to do what's best for my dog, but I cannot. I have, a 60-pound dog. That's a car payment if I feed raw. What would you say, what would be your suggestion on what they could do to even help elevate their bowl or help them along to kind of come to a way where they can at least feed some? We're always big believers in some is better than none, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on that too.
Is the problem that they feed commercial raw? Is that the problem of cost?
Let's a processed chicken. Sorry, if they're on a kibble and we're trying to, talk.
Are you trying to switch them to commercial raw, or you try to teach them how to produce home-produced raw?
Both sometimes.
I
would say more typically the stores are educating about whatever foods that they carry, which
are expensive for big dogs.
Yeah.
The whole of my thrust has always been home-produced food.
Yeah.
Because that is the way to go at it. And if you can find a source of raw meaty bones, like chicken wings and necks, and if you're concerned, kind of two concerns here, and you have these raw meaty bones, chicken wings and necks, which you can buy at a pretty cheap price if you want to, and that should be the basis of the diet. Now, if you have a big dog, they might choke on them. If you have a tiny little dog, they might have trouble eating them. Or a dog with a flattened face, one of the brachycephalic breeds. What do? You grind them up and form barf patties.
Yeah.
What people need to do, when I retired, I retired from being a vet to concentrate on a pet food business. We had a raw pet food business, and we were selling it hand over fist. We were selling it to Taiwan. We were selling it to Hong Kong. We were selling it around Australia. It was doing really well. But I had people making it for me. I personally wasn't involved in the making of it, but I very, very, very carefully formulated the diets. Anyway, this company was being sold to a large proprietary company that was I can't remember what sort of company they're called, but they used to fund people's retirement funds and all that sort of thing. And the owner of that company, who was going to make a squillion out of it, said to me, or actually got his CEO to say to me, well, you can either sell your part of this company for this little amount of money or not. And if you don't do that, if you don't sell it to us, we'll just wipe out your name and we'll continue to produce it because we've got all the recipes and we can do this. And we're too big for you to fight us, and we know you're too nice a bloke to do it. It kind of said all that sort of stuff. So I said, all right, well, I'll take the money and run, but as long as you stay with the recipes. So when I finally got out of that and retired and decided, look, I just need to, I have had a long desire to do other things other than talk about this. And it was just travel, and I'm a frustrated artist and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, so where was I going with all this?
I think we were just talking about you had your company which
that's right. Yeah. So I tried to get my product. That's right. I tried to get my product, and impossible. So I decided to myself. I go back to and it's quite a joy to make it yourself, but you need a grinder. This was the point I was making here.
Yeah.
And people need to get a commercial grinder. And there's dozens of them out there on the internet. And they're as cheap as chips, relatively speaking, particularly when you compare them to a bag of dog food, like a dry dog food from one of the major companies. So that's what I do. And I recommend to all the people that I'm consulting with, who are usually people with a major problem, could be cancer or diabetes or arthritis, inflammatory disease, autoimmune disease, whatever. Kidney failure is one of the biggest ones, but we talk about, I really encourage them to buy their own grinder, get hold of their own food, so that even if you've got a tiny dog that needs to grind up, or a big dog where you're afraid they're going to swallow and it'll block a trachea, or as they say in America, a trachea, it won't happen. You just put it through the grinder and you make these barf patties. And so under those circumstances, and then I ask them, well, okay, make some barf patties and then get some big dinosaur bones and let them chew on those, get the cartilage off the end of those, and the all the tendinous material and the muscle sheaths and whatever muscle meat is left, and so on and so forth. So we make up a diet that way, and it is relatively cheap if you do it that way. And you have to
I think so too.
invest in a large freezer and containers for food in, and put aside a weekend every 6 weeks where you make this stuff. Do you know what goes into it? It's all fresh. You can smell those chicken wings. You can smell everything you buy. I go to a local meat market or a local farmer's market where all this stuff is sold. But most people have something around the place they can do that. And I've just having extolled the virtues of complete and balanced. I can assure you that no recipe I do is ever the same, because it's all based on what is available seasonally and locally. But I have got those proportions roughly in my mind. It just sits there. And my dogs, and cats, I don't have to worry about their health, because they stay healthy. So that's what I'd recommend for people. They've got to make it themselves if they really have a concern. Buy a grinder and put together barf patties, and then supplement that with some raw meaty bones, big ones in the case of big dogs, and little tiny ones in the case of little dogs. It's just a matter of common sense, but don't rely necessarily on a pet food company to make you raw for you, because that's expensive. When I wrote Give Your Dog a Bone, did I put cheapness? I don't think I did. No, it says the practical, commons. Well, practical in terms of was cheap, very cheap.
Can you show it up, Ian? Can you show it on the screen? Just so we're going to link all of this, obviously, for everybody so they can get a hold of it.
My very first printing.
Oh, that's awesome.
That is very cool.
Look, I don't know whether you can see that, but it says Ian Billinghurst, his copy. So this is way back from 1993.
Oh, wow. Love it.
Amazing.
Looks a bit worn, and there's a very young Ian with his dogs at the time.
Oh, look at you. So great.
I love that. Ian, I love what you said about that, and that we have a slogan at EarthWise. We are a holistic pet supply store, so we sell raw foods. We have a slogan that is, you don't have to buy from us, but at least let us help you buy better. Because in the instance, we obviously, everything that you just described, we essentially create that convenience for people. So we have those ground up patties that you're talking about. We have all of that. So if someone doesn't want to invest that time, or they don't have the big freezer, or they don't want to buy the grinder, we have that for them. But we also very much support people that do want to find an easier avenue, because as far as we're concerned, our priority is the animal's health. And if we can make a convenient stop for you, then fantastic. We benefit from that. We're profitable then as well. But we would much prefer you choose raw and not buy from us.
Absolutely. And that was what my philosophy as a raw food producer for years.
Yeah.
And I would teach people that, look, the gold standard is to make it at home. That's the gold standard, if you do it properly. But secondly, if you can't do that, it's so convenient to buy frozen raw food. And what I taught them was really to look at a company and the way they do it, and their whole attitude. And if they like that and they're following basic raw feeding principles, then trust that company, because it makes it so much easier for you. This is the convenience, because kibble is convenient, and that's the big thing. And they're taught to trust kibble. Isn't that terrible?
Look, I actually want to just jump back to Lisa, because I know Lisa had a question there, so I don't want to.
No, go.
Lisa?
You mentioned talking about like changing up the ingredients and stuff, and we talk a lot about rotating, and we call it mixology. We make it, a little fancier. But what are your thoughts on, if you can kind of just let our listeners know, your thoughts on rotating proteins and the benefits of switching up the ingredients for your pet?
Can I just say what you just said and say yes?
Sure.
Absolutely. Of course. The wide range of raw whole foods and animal evolved required. But the more you can take the basic elements of raw and give different iterations of them, different species, different parts. For me, the basic internal organs are liver, kidney, and heart. And this idea of secreting organs, that's I wish I could use some expletives, but I better not. It's rubbish. All organs secrete. And, what you're trying to do is mimic evolution. So the more you can do that, the better. And I say liver, kidney and heart, where kidney and heart are approximately equal in volume to the amount of liver you give, or weight. It doesn't really matter because they're roughly the same. But what you have to remember, everybody who feeds their dog, is that over evolutionary time, there was nobody out there with a white coat and a stethoscope and a computer and a spreadsheet saying, do not eat that rabbit because you've had rabbit 3 times this week and you're overdoing whatever you decide that's in rabbit. You see, it's just rubbish.
Yeah.
Absolute rubbish. And no meal has to be complete and balanced because no animal over evolutionary time ever ate a complete and balanced meal, ever.
Right. We humanize it all the time. We're like, you eat a variety of fruits, veggies, proteins throughout the week to get your nutritional needs. It's not like you have to be 100% complete every single meal for every part of your day. So I'm so that too.
That's just a commercial imperative. It's not a biological imperative. And in fact, it's my contention that making every meal or attempting to make every meal complete and balanced is probably doing more harm than good. Now, I can't say how much harm, but it's rotating things so that in the wild, an animal might say, well, today I really feel like eating liver. And so they just concentrate on the liver. Or another day, I really just want to chew on a bone. We've got to somehow supply that to our animals. Whether we can do that, it is just a matter of getting our head around the idea. We probably can't go that far because we just can't put out a range of foods and say, oh, okay, there's a whole heap of foods, choose what you will. That's not going to work. So we have to have some idea, and hence those ratios that I give you, but they're not at every meal. That's important to know. And let me explain that 80-10-10 thing. 80-10-10 that everybody wants to go by is roughly the ratio of an animal without the internal organs, so without the vegetable materials, without the fermented stuff. And so what that implies, say, for a dog, is that a dog over evolutionary time has only ever eaten a whole animal or its equivalent at every meal. Now, that is fundamentally flawed from every point of view, and it leaves out the internal organs and all the fermented stuff. I mean, what you have to understand is that the dog is different to a cat. Now, even the cat doesn't do that. 80-10-10 is closer to the cat, but a cat sometimes, and quite often, will eat a whole mouse or a whole... So it includes the internal organs. But on another day, and I've observed this, just the heads. Then another day, maybe the meat, but leaving out the internal organs. So the cat doesn't eat 80-10-10 at every meal either. So that is just absolute rubbish. There you go. It's a very kind word, but it's rubbish. It's not scientific. It's not biological.
It's bullshit. It's bullshit. That's what you
It's bullshit. Thank you. It's just totally invalid, and it's unscientific. It's a hypothesis that has no basis in truth. But truth is actually unknowable. But no truth is truth as we understand it. So this is the thinking we have to get into our heads. That all of that set in stone stuff, it's just a legal imperative if you're selling a food which the law says has to be AVCO compliant. That's okay, fine. I accept that. That's the way it goes. But if you're making it at home, use your common sense and mix it up. Mix it up, and it doesn't have to be the same. And those ratios don't have to be the same every time. If you're making a patty, make the patties. Vary them around.
Wouldn't it be great if the purpose of us going to our vet was for blood work to say, oh, they're a little bit lower on this nutrient. We need to increase the liver intake or adjust this, or instead of, going there for ailments and issues. It would be wonderful to go there just to, see what they might be on.
That sounds like see, it's highly unlikely if you're feeding a whole raw food diet based on evolutionary principles that you would ever have to do that, because we really don't know what the correct blood values should be. That's only based on hundreds, thousands of animals eating kibble.
Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important for everyone that's listening to know, and something that I've tried my best to kind of combat over the years when I get questions about. People will literally just send me a customer's pet's values, their blood labs. That's all that they're sending to me. And then it'll be a quick, very vague message. Liver enzymes are high. What do we do now? You know what I mean? It's just end of the world, like liver enzymes. And I totally understand from that perspective. Seeing anything off on blood work is always a red flag. It's always alarming. But I always come back and say, I have so many questions. I don't even know where to begin. What are they eating? What is their life like? Like, tell me.
How are they?
Yes. Like, can we look at the pet as a being, a living being? Is it acting any differently than it normally does? Fluid intake different? What's going on? And then we can finally get down to the education level that requires relearning. What
If they're feeding a proper balanced diet and something's off, and they're overtly healthy, they're eating, they're active, they're acting normally, they're mentally normal, do a series of blood works over whatever period of time you want to do, because snapshots don't tell us much, particularly if there's nothing apparently wrong. But over a period of time, taking those blood values, it may be that it's absolutely normal for raw-fed dogs to have this. And that's one of the things we need to find out. We're never going to find it out if we have these alarm bells go off every time a healthy dog shows some apparently abnormal blood work. We've got to be more scientific in this and not so reactionary.
And you know, the vets are coming back when they see that and they're going, it's because of the raw diet. So you need to get on this liver diet, kibble, prescription diet, and to reverse those high liver enzymes. The amount of times I've heard this, I'm just like, oh,
it's infuriating. And you sit there and you
I heard it with my own pet when Bentley was older, and we did blood work when we moved down here, and the liver enzymes were elevated. And he's like, you need to switch. And he was already 15. You need to switch him off of this raw diet that you're doing and go on to a kibble diet. And I said, we're gonna agree to disagree here. We kind of left it at that, because I'm like, there's zero benefit of switching him to a kibble diet that's gonna do anything that the raw, like there's no. So it in the battle still, it's really real.
Dr. Ian, so I have a question for you in regards to your area of expertise then. What is the future for vets in terms of what do you believe their business model should look like? Because as I said earlier, we want them to be profitable. We need them to survive. We want them to be happy and feel like they're accomplishing something. So, to me, it sounds like there needs to be a completely different business model with vets. And we at EarthWise Pet, we've always wanted to join forces with them. It's just like, why aren't we working together? Why isn't there's something where we can benefit from each other?
Over the next, I don't know what period of time, it's very hard to know. Do we educate vets in raw food? Yes, we do. We ought to. Somebody should be educating them, but not in this AVCO way where they have to make sure every nutrient is there. In the actual truth of raw feeding, where you don't balance at every meal, et cetera, et cetera. So if we had vets that understood that, and we had people attempting to feed raw on that basis, I think for quite some time, in a crossover period, there'd be two things happening. There'd be people who feed kibble and need to be educated into feeding raw. There'd be people who are feeding raw and not doing it properly. And so if there's issues arising, the vets were educated enough to be able to do what I do basically, which is interrogate people. And I mean, I literally put them under the spotlight and make them tell the truth and what they're actually feeling. And then try and figure out, well, okay, you're following some basic trend which isn't the paradigm of raw. Please just go back to the simplicity of raw and this will fix itself. The problem is we have so many vets in the world today because animals are so sick because of all this kibble.
Yeah.
To obliterate the need for vets.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, my dad was a mechanic. My dad was a mechanic, and he used to say the same thing about mechanics. Like, he just said, if car companies get better and better at building their vehicles, hopefully, you know, my trade will be a dying trade. And my hope is that we don't want it to be a dying trade, just to be clear, but like,
no, we don't. No.
There's accidents, there's genuine illnesses that we have no reasons for. So we need vets, but it would be great if we had a smaller pool of happier, more successful vets than a larger pool of ones that are not succeeding. Yeah.
That's what we need. That's exactly what we need. And at the moment, the vet schools can't turn out enough to meet the increasing demand because of the huge level of pet ownership, the huge level of pet disease, and the inability to solve the problems using the conventional techniques. It's a bad situation. And yes, it has to go to better informed, better educated, particularly in nutrition vets, a smaller pool of happier, more knowledgeable and more contented vets, because they're actually going to be able to solve the problems for people. That's ideally where it's going to go. But you know, the problem we have other problems, and the other problem is we have a world where we believe, for example, that farm animals, shouldn't exist because they produce methane and that sort of thing. And yet we actually know this gets to a whole other area of regenerative farming. And regenerative farming is an area that is, if enough farmers take it up, it's going to solve this whole world climate problem because it's going to sequester carbon in the soil, make wonderful soil, which means wonderful plants. And this actually involves the use of animals that poop and urinate and move on. And it involves a whole series of regenerative farming. But that's because the soil is the foundation of our health. If we don't have healthy soil, we don't have healthy animals, or we don't have healthy animals and or plants, then we are doomed as a species. So
yeah,
there are much wider implications to all of this. And
there really is. We're just trying to control too much.
I guess I can speak because of my early training as an ag scientist when we did soil science and all that stuff. And now I look at it I think genuinely holistically and think we have to get this planet back into some sort of order. And that's quite apart from the order of the terrible things we do to each other as human beings. But anyway, so I guess as I talk to people, I talk on lots of fronts these days. I talk on regenerative farming, the need for animals, the building up of soil, and the use of livestock in the right way, and of course, humane use of livestock. I mean, the terrible things we do to pigs and poultry is just shocking.
We can't go on. That's not from. I can't be on that podcast. Just to be clear.
No, well, I don't know about the. I'm probably not trying to do a podcast. I'm just trying to. This is all part of the greater awareness of this planet, and
it's horrible. I lose sleep over it. It's horrible. Yeah. I know we've taken up so much of your time, but I actually have a couple of other things I just wanted to touch on with you. One of them is a question, and one of them is a bit of a statement that I just wanted you to respond to. So one of them is, I actually talk with Erica about this a lot. I think sometimes people forget that walking your dog is actually part of their nutrition. So when they get, and same with cats, so even cats going out. So I understand that we need to be responsible, keep our cats in for certain periods of time, but they also need to get access to dirt on their paws, and they need access to grass. And they are getting minerals from that dirt, and they need to be eating grass. A lot of people don't realize a dog and a cat, it's part of their nutrition to actually ingest a little bit of grass. I think that's one of the things that we forget as pet parents is walking your dog, letting them sniff things, letting them ingest natural, natural bodies is so important and is part of this raw feeding.
Microbiome.
Yes.
That's what they're looking up. Very much so. Touching the earth. We all need to touch the earth. I can't, people talk about demagnetizing or whatever. I don't know. But it's part of our heritage that we touch the earth, that we weren't separated from it. It's part of who we are. So, yes, breathe the air, breathe actual air. Hopefully eat a little bit of grass that hasn't been sprayed with some herbicide or pesticide or something.
You have to be careful of that. Yes, in public parks and things like that. That's for sure.
Our heritage as living beings, whether we're dogs, cats, humans, or whatever, is nature out in forests or savanna lands or whatever. But that's part of our mental health, and it's as true for our dogs and cats as it is for us. So, that's all part. That's part of it. All part of the whole cycle, the whole being. This is truly true holism, and when we start to do that, we get greater health. It's all part of health and longevity and happiness, and the production of the right hormones and transmitters in our brains, our central nervous system, the whole thing. We don't understand any of how this works, but we know it does.
Yeah,
because it's part of our evolutionary background. Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. Fancy me not remembering that, but anyway.
Well, I'll never forget it. But I know Erica and Lisa may actually have other questions, but my last question to you is, what is your response to the growing community of folks out there that are actually doing the complete opposite and are promoting vegan diets for dogs and cats? I myself am a vegetarian for many reasons, but I understand that my cats are not. So what is your response to these folks who are trying to switch their dogs and cats to vegan diets, which is very common?
So what's the definition of a vegan diet? Just so we're all on the same page.
No animal products whatsoever.
What's that?
No animal products whatsoever. So not even milk or eggs. Nothing that would contain animal.
And honey is not one of them, so you can't do honey either.
Cats cannot live on that. They're not designed at all because they are obligate carnivores. A dog could. I'm not saying, a dog could become totally vegan. Yes, it could.
It could survive.
It's not what evolution designed for our dogs. So really working on the hypothesis that if you feed a dog animal this way, and that's the hypothesis, that gives us the greatest chance of health and longevity, I would stick to that as the hypothesis. I don't know how they're going with their so-called vegan diets. What's the energy source?
Some of them, I follow them on social media to see what they're saying, and you will get people that pop out of the woodwork that say, I had a cat that lived for 17 years on a vegan diet and things like this. But, the question is are they thriving? Our animals can't talk to us. So what if they're in pain? What if they've got low energy? What if the fact that your cat is sleeping 18 hours a day has nothing to do with them being a sleepy cat? I know that when I feed raw to my cats, they're actually got a ton of energy. They're not sleepy cats.
I'll stick with the basic hypothesis, but I'd be very interested to have a look at. Well, I'd be very interested. Usually when somebody makes a claim they've had a cat for 17 years, it's only ever eaten vegan. That's probably what they fed it. But that cat, unless it's living in a house with them and that has no access to anything else, I guarantee that cat will die because physiologically it cannot get from vegetables what it requires. It actually requires preformed vitamin A, which it's not going to get from vegetables. A whole host of other things, all right? It's not going to get taurine from vegetables. It's going to die. Cats definitely can't survive on a vegan diet. Dogs might. They probably won't thrive. Ideally, we won't go vegetarian for dogs. And I would also guess that these people are feeding carbohydrate as a principal energy source.
Definitely. And they're also supplementing with synthetic vitamins and minerals to meet the needs that plant sources don't have, like chlorine and preformed, whatever it is. They're absolutely, they're creating lab, formulas that meet the needs nutritionally, which is exactly how we started this whole conversation. You can be a scientist. You can create a diet, a complete and balanced diet in a lab that has every known essential nutrient for a dog or cat. You can do that. It can be vegan. It can be, an obligate carnivore diet, whatever you want to call it. But when we look at just the holistic side of nutrition, and it's exactly what you said, Dr. Ian, they are not going to thrive on something that is vastly different than their evolutionary diet. What they are literally designed to consume and utilize, this will not ever give the same results as that evolutionary diet. So at the end of the day, you can eat all you want.
We need to look at these animals that are being fed over time, whether they will respond, I would guess, just the same as animals fed on processed pet food. That over time they will start to, they will age more rapidly because they're not getting their proper nutrition, the one that they evolved to require. And aging brings degeneration. Degeneration brings degenerative disease, and they will just fall into the pattern in old age of requiring. They'll get on what I call a medical merry-go-round, where there's just a ongoing series of tests and drugs to keep them going. And yes, they can be kept going for some time. Very expensive, painful for the animal, and it's not a joyous life. And part of the joy for any animal is eating what it actually evolved to require.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. That's so true.
Yeah, part of the joy, when I talk about giving it bones, I say, okay, people think of bones as a source of calcium. There's so much more than that. There's so much more nutrition in it, but there's also the psychological benefits, and so on and so forth. And it forms the right sort of food for the microbiome, on and on. But we just don't know. All we do is feed them. It just gets back to the basic hypothesis. Feed them what they evolved to require, and this is the best way to ensure ongoing health and longevity. And, I come back to this all the time. Yes, you can do those other things, but I don't think you're going to have an animal that is truly happy and healthy and long-lived without the need for drugs and whatever.
Yeah. And false minerals, pretend synthetic vitamins to fill the gaps. It would be like living on an intravenous drip. To keep
living in space on whatever pills they eat out there.
And we always talk about, you could humanizing it. There's protein bars that are complete imbalance for humans. Same thing, you can make kibble complete and balanced, whether it's a vegan diet or not. But are you going to thrive? I mean, you'll survive, but you won't thrive. It's that thriving piece that's where we're trying to get people to understand, is that thriving piece. We want all.
Absolutely.
We do want to thank you again, and we're going to link all of your relevant links so people can find you, contact you. And for those of you watching or listening, you can actually set up consultations with Dr. Ian Billinghurst, who we would strongly advise to do that if that is something within your means. We also have certified pet dietitians who speak a very similar language in our stores. And as I said before, we have a slogan and we stand by it. You don't have to buy from us, but at least let us help you buy better. So whether that's making it at home or even sourcing it from another store, if we get your pet onto raw, we have considered that a win. And so, but if it's a struggle, we also have convenient solutions for you in the store as well. So thank you again.
One other thing that I have to say, I don't know whether you're aware of it, but I've now produced a full course on what we've been talking about today, and people can go there. It's
on your website, right?
No, it's a new website. It's Billinghurst, Billinghurst.institute.
Okay. Beautiful. We're going to link all of that.
People can go to that. People can become a professional or just for pet parents, anybody, or there's a professional arm to that where I do talk more about creating prescription diets of the raw variety, which I did touch on a bit today, that you can do that. Mostly you don't need to do it, but occasionally, say with an advanced renal failure, then you do need to tinker with those proportions and add little supplement. But so they can go to Billinghurst.institute and learn more about that, as well as my website. So
beautiful, which is, and our regular website is drbillinghurst.com for
yes.
Dr. Ian Billinghurst, sorry. We will link everything.
Because my email, it's dr.billinghurst.com. Also, I'm involved with a fermented vegetable product called Gussie's Gut, to which I'm invited. Gussie's Gut. So that's just gussiesgut.com, I think. Which I was persuaded to do this because this was the last arm. This is the poo substitute bit. It's a very good poo substitute for those who live in an area where their dog or cat cannot go out and eat poo. Because our dogs are coprophagic. We haven't even touched on that, but that's another story. They're actually designed to eat poo, and they get a lot of nutrients.
Yeah, we did speak. We spoke about that on another podcast where we were just conversing. What would a dog eat, and we mentioned that. Yeah, they are meant to eat.
That'll be part 2 with you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There is very much more to this simple diet, because once you understand there's so much more, you become even more convinced just to do it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It's all about education. I don't think we're going to have these podcasts in 20 years' time. I truly do have faith that the new generation of pet parent coming up is very aware that we have over-processed and over-controlled our pets' diets. And, we've even said that at EarthWise Pet. Like at the moment, we have a market because people aren't feeding correctly. So that's the market for, we have our services, obviously, so we'll always have a market. But we're totally fine for this side of our business to one day not have a need.
Make yourself redundant.
Yeah.
100%. The goal is to make ourselves redundant because there is plenty of other things for us to do and focus on. And we hope to achieve that in the future someday.
Okay, very good.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dr. Ian Billinghurst, otherwise just lovingly known as Ian. We will see you again at some stage, and we so appreciate your time.